everyone. Thank you for being here for our webcast. My name is Dylan Rodgers. I'm the Content Strategy Manager at Schoology. That means I work on different pieces of content, a lot like this. So welcome to our 30-minute webcast. If you've joined us for any presentations before, this is going to be a little different. We're trying to keep it under 30 minutes. It's a little more conversation-based, so you can see me and my guest, Kara. And we'll be also incorporating some video of an interview that we did previously that we think is very relevant to this conversation. So, Kara, would you introduce yourself, please?
Happily. So hi, everybody. I'm Kara Gann. I am a senior client, a success manager for Schoology. But I think one of the neat things about me, Dylan, is that I was a first grade teacher for 15 years and worked in the educational environment as an instructional coach and district level administrator for 28 years. So I was thrilled when you asked me to be part of this webinar because it gives me a chance to talk about things that are dear to my heart.
That's great. Yeah, and you're exactly the right person for this conversation with your experience and all. So today, everyone, we're going to be talking about using technology in elementary education, specifically LMSs. Now, as we sent this invite out and started getting some responses from it, I realized that there are quite a few people that don't know what an LMS is. And I want to just touch on that very briefly. So an LMS is a learning management system. It's kind of the hub where all digital learning is happening. Whether you do a blended or online, purely online format, it's where the online course is housed. It's where all the materials are housed. It's where you pass out assignments and collect assignments, record grades, have discussions, all kinds of things like that. They're very robust systems. So just wanted to make that clear. Now, one thing about LMSs is that often there's this myth that they're often thought to be for middle school, high school, college, but not for elementary. It's just not a good fit. But today we're going to bust that myth. So let's dive in. So Kara, when you're thinking about when people say, I'm not sure an LMS is a good fit for elementary, do you agree with that?
Well, Dylan, you knew that starting off that I was going to disagree with that because I'm here to bust that myth. So the first thing I was going to say about that is that students today, they're growing up with technology all around them. And I think it's really important that we start their learning experiences in the schools, meeting them where they're at. And there's so many incredible benefits of using an LMS all the way down in kindergarten. And one of the most important things I think that we see when we're in the kindergarten environment is that parents are very active in the kindergarten child's schooling experience. And I don't know if you remember when you were in high school and your parents really weren't that involved and you kind of told them where you were. When you're in kindergarten, your parents are really right there, usually part of your life. And I love the way that engaging students at even the kindergarten level in an LMS really brings the parents into the classroom and gives them security about what's happening in the classroom. And it also lets the parents start to see how they can be part of their child's learning all the way through the school experience.
Excellent. Yeah, there's a lot you can think about with an LMS. Most people think that they think of it as an instructional tool, right? But it really can be the hub for the educational community, the people, the parents, the students, teachers, administrators, and bringing everyone together into a single space. Mm-hmm. So another question I have for you is, often different systems, different ways of learning are used at different levels of education. And I just wonder what you think about the power of having an LMS that, say the LMS is used in high school or middle school. Is there a benefit to having that, using that same LMS in elementary as well?
Well, Dylan, I've been thinking about that because I think about my own personal life. Every time I have to learn a new tool, what happens to me? I have a setback in my ability to be able to communicate. Say you move from a different email system. There's always that learning curve that goes into it. And so I feel like if you start with the same LMS and you take it all the way through the learning experience, you're not using unnecessary time and energy on learning something, so the students can just really focus on the academic piece, not just the features of a tool. And I think another piece that matters when you're thinking about a learning management system is it's not uncommon for parents to have multiple students in a school system. So if they're having to toggle between one place and another place to get information about their children, it's not going to be as seamless for them. And so I feel like it's important that we make that experience as consistent as possible, not only for the student, but for the parents, and then also even for the teachers as they move different grade levels. So I'm a big proponent of working with an LMS and keeping it in place from the first experience in kindergarten all the way through graduation.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece of that because, I mean, kids are going through, they're learning so many different things. Right, all the information is new, and dealing not only with curriculum and with their teachers, and also social experiences, and then going to new schools once they hit middle school, and I mean all those factors can get in the way of learning, and so making that as consistent as possible is, I think, a pretty good call, pretty good point.
Well, I think we need to minimize distractions. No, I just think we need to minimize the distractions. We have too many distractions out there, and by doing a similar tool like an LMS that's consistent from K through 12, that's one distraction we don't have to worry about.
Right. Well, we have a video to show you. It's of an interview with a 4th and 5th grade teacher named Jessie Bhutto. Jessie was interviewed by one of our colleagues, Michael and Deglio, and Jessie talks about his strategy for using an LMS in elementary, and how that evolved over time. And he also shows some of what he's actually done, some of the activities his students have actually been able to do because of this. Now, he uses Schoology, and he will talk a lot about this, but I want you to take a step back and think about how this can also translate to whatever tools you're using as well. So let me go ahead and cue that up for everybody.
My name is Jessie Bhutto. I teach at Randolph Heights Elementary in St. Paul, Minnesota. I've been a teacher for 13 years. I teach a 4-5 combined class, so a split grade class. I've been using Schoology now for really 2 years solidly. This is my 2nd year using Schoology. I have been named the Minnesota CBS Digital Innovator for 2016 and an Apple Distinguished Educator in 2017. So this work that I've been doing has really been important, and Schoology has been a big piece of that for this last year in moving my class forward in a digital way. So I had in my head for a while the idea of trying to turn the math curriculum over to my students and figure out a way. Our district has broken all the standards into specific learning targets. We have specific learning targets, and then we have assessments for each of those learning targets. And I've been playing with the idea of how can I get my students to independently kind of choose where they want to go, and say, I'm going to study this geometric learning target. I'm going to become a master at it, and then I'm going to take an assessment on it. So how can I create content that the students can work on by themselves, and then how do I get that assessment to them in an easy way? So I jumped in and I started putting everything in Schoology. I started to use Schoology sort of as the backbone of my math time. So Schoology was the place where the kids would go. Everything would be organized for them. They would be able to find it easily, work on it easily. It may take them to other places, but we always return to Schoology as sort of the home base, the home space.
Like a central hub.
Exactly. I really look at it as like the skeleton of what I do. Other things, maybe the muscle, maybe the thing that they actually are working in, but that skeleton, that piece that holds everything together is what Schoology does for me. I sort of abandoned the idea of that complete voice and choice and letting them choose whatever they wanted to do, and instead it became a self-paced scope and sequence. So there's a prescribed sequence of the units, but the kids are able to go through it at any pace that they want. So I've got students who go really quickly through units, and I've got kids who need a little bit more time and work much more slowly, and they can work at their pace. And so what that's freed me up to do is give my those kids who kind of get it, or it comes to them easily, it gives them something to do, something to work on. And it frees me up then to work with those students who are struggling and really devote my time to working with those students. So I've got 4th grade units, 5th grade units. I've got some 6th grade units for at the end of the year once we pass our tests, or for kids who have moved on really fast and finished all of 5th grade. I've got a few 6th grade standards as well. If we go into one of them, you'll see that they're broken down. I broke them down by unit. And this is different than the way our district has broken them down. But I instead took them and broke them down in unit that corresponds with the learning target for the state standard. So within a unit, I try to organize it into consistent pieces. I always start with an overview, so a page that just sort of describes what it is I'm looking for. There may be some instruction in here. I try to keep it text light because I know my students tend not to read the text when it's in front of them. In fact, sometimes I'll put little Easter eggs into my text and say at the end of a paragraph, I'll say, if you read this paragraph, come find me and I'll give you something. And I usually get 1 or 2 students per time who actually come and say, oh, I read that sentence. So knowing that, I try to keep it image heavy, and I try to use videos whenever possible because that's really a good way for me to explain. So in this one, I just have some pictures and saying, do you see the triangles in this picture? Oh, wait, how now do you see the triangles in this picture? And then at the bottom, I always include what are the criteria that I'm looking for in this unit. I'm asking you to draw shapes, and I'm in this Schoology assignment, and then I'm asking you to create an artifact, that is, create a book that shows triangles both in the real world and on paper.
So it does sound like you've really embraced that transition from direct instruction to facilitation and coach.
Yep, I have not taught a whole group lesson in front of the class in 1.5 years. Well, I guess now 1 3/4 years. And instead, I'm doing small groups, I'm doing individual work, I'm moving around the classroom assisting kids wherever they're at. And it's an amazing transition. It feels right. It feels really good. I feel much more involved in where they are on a daily basis, and because I know where they are and I know what they're understanding and not understanding.
Have you noticed a shift in seeing students feeling more empowered as they've taken sort of a more hands-on role in their education compared to when it was more direct instruction?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Much more empowered. I mean, even just the idea that when they get stuck or they see that red dot over and over and over again, they come and find me. Whereas before they'd try to hide it, or they wouldn't care, or they just do it and not know. Now they know, I'm getting it wrong. I need to go find Mr. Bhutto. I need to go get some help. This is my responsibility. What I have done, though, is tried to train my parents as much as possible to sort of check their child's progress in Schoology. I said the grades are up there. They will be up there for you to look at so that you can see if kids are making due dates, are they're done or not done. What are some
starting points? What are some things you can do to get started right away utilizing an LMS or utilizing Schoology at this level?
It's got to be a small start. I'm going to pop this link into Schoology, and there you go, guys, and you're just going to go straight there. So something even as simple as that, the huge time saver and the huge hassle saver of pointing kids in a direction on a website is really amazing. Handing kids a PDF is really simple. Pop it into Schoology, say open it up, put it in Notability or some other thing that works the same way, and you've got it. And from there, it's about starting to build small units. I'd say, start with one unit that you want to build and put the instructions into Schoology. So start with just an assignment. Here, do this, take a picture of it, upload it back into the assignment. Just moving yourself slowly. The more you do, the more it really takes over. I started with math, and I've spent the last 1.5 years or more working almost nonstop on building these math units. It's been an incredible amount of work. But now that most of them are built and up and running, I don't have to do that again.
I think that's one of the things I take away is seeing your students creating.
The thing that I try to do in my classroom is creation over consumption. It's not enough to have passive screen time. It's not enough for them to just be consuming media. If they're not creating, then they're not using their tools for what they're there for. We need to be teaching their kids to create. We need to be teaching them to use this media and these tools for the power that they are. And it's that creation that is going to create the learning and really seal that stuff in. I can give them a lot of problems to just do over and over and over again, but it's not until they have to explain it back to me, until they have to create something that shows that they really understand it, that it really sinks in and becomes real. So creation is the key.
I hope you read this book.
That's a really interesting way of looking at this. Don't you agree, Kara?
Absolutely, absolutely. I love what Jesse had to say, and I love the way that he shared with us how he was using an LMS to really change the way he was instructing his students.
I agree. And something that's really, really cool about it is just to see the way he progressed. So he started with why he actually wanted to do it, and he kind of worked his way through until it was a reality, adjusted over time as he went. So as we heard this story, and Kara and I got to thinking about, well, how, say you're bought into it. You're bought into, okay, I think I'm going to try using an LMS in elementary. Maybe you're an administrator who wants to incorporate that in your elementary schools. How do you actually get started? Well, we worked it out to coming up with 7 key steps, kind of considerations, but they are in order here. 7 steps for getting started using an LMS in elementary. So the first step that we have here is starting with the why.
Right, and I think that's the most important thing that we need to think about when you're an instructor. You always want to start with the why. What's the end goal? And so when I'm thinking about teaching a lesson, or even in my classroom, especially like my first grade classroom, I'm saying, well, what is my goal for using an LMS? So let's just say that maybe it's about communication and transparency with students. And I'm thinking, well, how do I communicate with my parents? What's the way that I normally send information out to them? Do I put it in the folder that goes home daily with the student? Do I post it on the bulletin board outside where we do pickup? I mean, how do I actually get that information to parents? So it's one of those things that an LMS can have the ability to do a really nice job of keeping the parent engaged inside the classroom. And so you can use that as your communication tool. We've had a number of individuals who have used an LMS to communicate with their parents and have had very positive comments about how they feel like the parents feel more involved in the classroom, and it really has allowed the parents an eye inside of the classroom that they normally wouldn't have received. And then I think about what Jesse said. He's talking about he wanted to do some more differentiating of his learning. And so his goal was to really start thinking about, how do I build lessons where I can be working individually with students while they're directing their own learning and having their own agency. So I think that's really important for Jesse. That was his why. But I think overall, the most important thing is why does it make your lessons more meaningful, and how does it make your classroom more engaging?
Right. I think that's right. And so it's important to start with the why. It's like Simon Sinek talks about, building everything off of the why is crucial here. A lot of people end up going the route of, oh, I want to use an LMS, but they're not sure why. And then they end up getting a tool or some devices, and it doesn't exactly work with how they had planned on originally. So starting with the why, and then thinking about your next steps here. The next step of setting a vision for learning.
Right, and when you think about what does learning look like already inside of your classroom, you need to think about everything from your classroom management style to the types of curriculum you're teaching. What's your configuration? What type of equipment do you have access to? Do you have wireless? We still have schools out there that don't have, even wireless capabilities in their classrooms. Do you have computer labs? Do you have computer carts? There's so many items that you have to think about when you're setting your vision for learning, when you're going to include technology, especially in LMS. I think that what we also have to think about is, what is your pedagogical approach for your learning, and how does that play into what it looks like already? And when I think about that, I go back to think about some of Heifetz's works about technical versus adaptive challenges. We're talking a lot about, okay, do I have equipment? Do I have Wi-Fi? Do I have those things? Those are all technical challenges that we have to solve for. But then we also have to think about the adaptive challenges, and how are we changing behaviors, and how are we changing student behaviors and instructional behaviors?
Right, and yeah, this is a big adaptive challenge. This is not it's not a simple flip a switch sort of thing. This is changing an entire strategy, changing the way you approach and the way you view learning and teaching in general. which is why it's important. So when you're thinking about setting a vision, and the reason we have this here is that it's good to set a baseline of a vision. With people who are running this initiative, right? Setting a baseline, but then bringing in other stakeholders to communicate that vision, communicate why are we doing this, and work with them to refine that.
Well, exactly. And whenever you think about change and you're going to be changing something using an LMS, you want to think about, how do I make sure everybody's on board with me? And communication is a key piece. And if you think about why change fails, and when we talk about, things that have gone bad, it's usually because people didn't understand what was happening. So communication is at the heart of all of that. For students, regardless of age, it's a culture shift. I think about how many students are used to their parents not being involved in their classroom, and all of a sudden now they have visibility into it. And you have these students going, oh, my mom and dad, they know what's going on. My grandparents can see all this stuff. So you have to communicate, hey, this is going to happen. This is going to be part of this change in our thinking. And you need to communicate that, because together you're creating new attitudes, you're creating new visions. I think this is a conversation. This is kind of a new space for education in general. It's 10, 15 years. I'm not certain how many years, but it's not been the norm for a lot of people. And so we're having to redefine the learning. And with that, we need to communicate what we think the new vision looks like.
Right. Communicating that vision, bring everyone in. And it's funny. So we've started with the why. We've set a vision for what we think. So what should learning look like? How do we want to enhance that? And then working with different, working with teachers and administrators in the district or school, and refining that vision. It's funny that only now are we going to look at choosing an LMS, right?
I know.
Choosing your technology.
It is kind of funny, isn't it? Because we're talking about LMSs, and then we get down to number 4, and we're saying, now take a look at your LMS. But the truth is that, we need to think about, what does the LMS do? Now, some individuals have LMSs at the district level. Some people don't have LMSs purchased at this time, so they have to think about the LMS as the tool. And then they have to go back and think about, well, how do I want to use it? How do I want to change my instructional practices with this? And so then you have to look at, do you want something that allows you to do more discussions? Do you want something that allows you to communicate with parents? Do you just need something that manages documents? What is your overall goal? So then you take the LMS and you make that fit for your why. As an instructional leader for so many years in my career, how many times do we buy a tool and ask the teachers to fit into it? That's not exactly the way instruction should be designed. It should be the instructional leaders are designing the instruction, and then we put the tools in place to make sure that it hits where the vision and where the learning is going.
Right. It's kind of like taking a trip. So when you pick your destination, that's your goal. Then having a map to get there, understanding what you need to take with you, all those things, and then you get in the car. And the car takes you there. The car in this case is your technology. But the car doesn't decide where you should be going or what you should be doing. Exactly. And I think that's a real distinction here.
Exactly.
So the next step, as you're thinking about, so we start with the why again, setting a vision, refining that vision, and then figuring out how the technology is going to support that vision. Then it's important, as you're rolling it out, to start thinking about, well, how does that happen? And you got to be realistic, right?
Oh my gosh, you have to be so realistic, because the first thing that as a teacher is going to think is, I have to change everything. I have to change it overnight. I've spent so much time designing lessons. This is what I've done. And you have to be realistic with that. So it's a gradual shift in your teaching practice. So as a leader, you have to think about, what's a clear expectation that I can set that I know that my staff can handle? How am I modeling that so that they know that I'm serious too? You can't expect to start off with your every unit you ever taught for the whole year to be in your LMS. I always said when I was an instructional coach, let's start with just one thing. Let's look at one thing, maybe something that you're doing great at and you just want to enhance it. Or maybe it's something that you don't feel really strong in and you think this is a great place for you to learn a new skill. And so you just add it to your classroom in these small increments. And when you start to do that, then you start to create energy because everybody starts changing in how they're thinking, which makes you feel more positive about you as an instructor. And then when you do that, other people around you start to notice. And as they start to notice, they start to want to, copy you. They might want to come in and observe. And so I think that's where, you have to be realistic to where you have to allow the space for people to grow and to learn and share and to build champions and support structures. And you just have to be realistic about how you want to move forward with an LMS in the classroom.
Right, and it seems like this is something that as you're communicating your vision and working with different stakeholders and figuring out the way forward, it seems like a good idea to be thinking of this, thinking about what does it look like in year one, then in year two, and setting those expectations up front. But it's important as you're thinking about this, it seems. So the next point is to start simple.
Exactly. And I think I mentioned that a little bit about your vision. I think the vision with the starting simple kind of go hand in hand. I was thinking about sometimes you might have an activity where you're writing in journals with students and you're writing back and forth, and or you're having students write back and forth to each other. What a great place for you to just enhance that activity where you start writing in an LMS. And you start using discussions in an LMS, and then all of a sudden you start to hear the voice of the student who never talks in class, or is really you're just not certain what they're thinking about, and it gives them a safe place for them to visit. I think about parents not knowing what's going on. You can also use an LMS when we talk about upcoming events. Sending pictures of what's happening in the classroom inside an LMS is a great way that you can use, say, a media album. You can actually have parents at home with their students inside of an LMS, looking at the learning and them doing activities with their own children. In one of the schools I used to teach at, English as a second language was a pretty big deal, and the parents were actually learning English alongside with their students learning when they were in the kindergarten, first grade classrooms. And so an LMS allows some of that learning to happen across the whole family structure. And I think another piece is just letting students have a voice in what you're doing when you start simple, because they're going to tell you a lot about what they like and don't like and how they see this helping them in their learning.
Those are all good points, and it makes me think that sometimes I hear there seems to be a perception that when you start using an LMS or learning platform in general, that it's kind of an all or nothing idea, and that's really not the case. So starting simple, is such an important piece of this, that just taking it one step at a time, using one thing. As you mentioned, all the examples you gave is really just like using one feature and having a really big impact that way.
Exactly. And then that takes us into point 7, Dylan, about support experimentation, is you want to create a structure for everyone to explore and experiment. And, you want to create that safe space so that they can go out and try something that's unfamiliar to them. Elevate those people who are trying and taking the risks, whether it's even having 5 minutes on your faculty meetings to talk about, here's what we're doing, here's how I can help you, here's what I'm seeing and we're liking as a community and as my parents are enjoying, providing time for collaboration. There's so many pieces that leaders can do to create the structure for this type of experimentation, which I think in the end you're going to see tremendous growth in student achievement as you incorporate all the tools that are available.
Yeah, and whether we like it or not, we learn from failure, and we often fail when we try new things. So there has to be room for that, it seems.
Absolutely. So those are the 7 key steps, Dylan, that I think are really important when you were thinking about an LMS. I
think that's a great list, and so I know that we're coming up to our time here. We're actually just now over time. So first of all, I just want to thank everyone who's been here, who joined us for this webcast. we're going to stay for 5-10 minutes and answer any questions that you might have. So if you'd like to stay on and ask some questions or just listen to the answers, that would be great. If not, we are recording this and we'll be sending you a recording. But again, thank you for being here. We hope that that this gave you a little better snapshot of, first of all, why an LMS could be an important tool in elementary, and what you might be missing out on if you're not incorporating that. Okay, so let's get to some questions. What do you say? We have one question here from Pam Fesco, which is Google Classroom considered an LMS? Kara, do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. So we hear a lot about Google Classroom, and Google Classroom is a great tool for the classroom. And I think Google will even tell you this, that Google Classroom is not an LMS. It is a way to manage documents, digital documents. I think that's probably the easiest way to put it. They have an API that is able to be used inside of LMSs. And it actually gives the Google Classroom experience in an LMS. So it is not an LMS, although it is a really wonderful tool, and its main purpose is for document management inside of the classroom. So.
Excellent. Yes, and it's a good stepping stone because it's a it helps with the assignment workflow. But when you're thinking about an LMS, you're thinking about not only the assignments, but other forms of formative assessment, summative assessment, grade books, parent involvement, transparency with different people within the district or the school,
Mm-hmm.
and how all of that connects together, right? So thinking about going from planning out and designing courses to to assessing student understanding and then bringing that all back around. An LMS really has everything that you would need for that. Now, granted, most schools and districts use other tools as well. And what's cool is that an LMS can bring those into a single interface and to really simplify the workflow and just, with the goal of saving you time, making it a little easier for you.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at some other questions here. Stephanie Ryan asks, would love to know if Jared is in a one-to-one environment as he runs his courses. Kara, do you happen to know?
I do not know if he's in a one-to-one environment, but the things that he visited about, I do think he definitely has some sort of stations set up in his classrooms where they do have access to technology. Not everything has to be online. So although I couldn't tell from the video and I wasn't part of the interview, I do believe that it definitely helps to have one-on-one, but that's not necessary.
Right, it's not necessary. And that brings you back to that point when we're talking about, setting your vision for what learning should be and taking stock of your current situation. So if you have a station rotation set up and you have a station of computers, you can definitely use an LMS using that. It's not a one-to-one environment, obviously, but there's still a lot of value to be had there.
I think that's a myth, Dylan, too. I think there's a myth out there that you should be one-to-one to use an LMS, and yet we see a lot of amazing technology integration happening with LMSs and with technology in general by having just salt centers or carts. We got to do what we can with what we have. Yeah.
So Travis asks, can you show an example of how a course is set up at a more primary grade level? So Kara, I don't know if you have one queued up at this point, but if not, can you just kind of describe it in a bit of detail? So let me start you off. So at least with Schoology for sure, you go to the materials part of a course.
Mm-hmm.
And you have folders. How might you organize the folders and the content within those folders?
So I think one of the things that we think of at, say, the secondary level is we have like the courses, because we have the courses are math, science, social studies, or whatever the course name is. And in the elementary school, we start to see more of that blending together. So one of the things that I do when I think about an elementary classroom setup is in Schoology, and we'll talk Schoology on this one here, is I might have a folder. I might have one course that they would actually go into, and inside of it, it would have folders. So it might have their language arts, and inside there would be everything that they use for their reading and their language arts. And inside another folder might be math. Another folder might even just be parent communication. It's all living all at the same level in there. Because when you get into the secondary schools, you're actually driving into each of the individual teachers' courses. Whereas at the elementary, it's one teacher or maybe two teachers that are really instructing all the content areas. So you use the LMS to house the information in a collective manner rather than in a siloed manner. So that's the first thing. I think a second thing is that Schoology has the ability to do the tiles, and so it's just a click. So it's like a button. So they don't have to drag to the toolbar and then wait for it to come down. They can actually just click on an image, and it allows you to have different images. You can have different colors. So even in your youngest students who don't read, pick the yellow folder. Inside the yellow folder, pick this. So I think you can do a lot of those visual cues that you wouldn't necessarily think about in an older classroom.
And not even just that, changing the way you think about it in some ways, and you can make it very visual. We have some examples on our blog, actually, schoology.com/blog, where we have course show and tells, and teachers kind of walking through their courses on video and showing how you can make it visual. It could be really powerful that way, and even setting up an entire landing page of images that students are able to go through.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think and again, that comes back to that adaptive challenge, right? So if you've used an LMS before or not, but you're thinking about one, generally you kind of probably lean on the text side of things. It's a bit text heavy, but there's so much you can do, even with just a little bit of knowledge on how to import a photo, right? And changing the way you think about that and looking for ways to make it more visual, to make it more engaging that way, I think is worthwhile.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think about even how you can use assessments that aren't necessarily for assessments, but at centers. So the student can do a drag and drop as part of an assessment piece. Maybe they're taking the letter of the alphabet, and maybe they're learning vowels, cat, car, and they can actually build those letters together by dragging and dropping, and then the teacher can actually see their workflow, even with just one computer at one center.
That's right. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Let's see. So Bethany asks, are there examples of using Schoology or say other LMSs for pre-K through 2 or second grade teachers?
Well, Dylan, we have the elementary website. We've actually have a couple videos on that website that are queued up with, I think there's a first grade teacher who's talking specifically about the ways that she uses Schoology in her first grade classroom. So I think when you think about the pre-K to kindergarten, I think it's more of a communication tool. And then as they move into the later semester, the second semester of the kindergarten place, you can definitely see more involvement in there. And then as they get into first grade, they're still in the tool. They're still using it. The parents are used to the communication piece there. I do think that it's one of those scaffolding pieces where you start simple, like we talked about, and then you build on it. And then when they start to move up into, say, the second semester of second grade, there's definitely a higher level of reading and writing, definitely a higher level of understanding the platform because they've had a couple of years to work in it. They're getting more comfortable with the keyboards. So I think it's the scaffolding piece based on where your students are and where your vision is.
Yeah, I think that's right. And for anyone who is interested in seeing those videos, go to schoology.com/supporting-elementary. And I believe we shared the link in the chat here, and you can see some of those videos. There's also a couple videos, I think, that aren't on this, that are on our blog, and they're worth checking out. There's a great video on kindergarten students using an LMS, using Schoology in a really, really cool way. It's great to see.
Yes. There's a question, Dylan, about whether or not Schoology has any plans for adding a QR feature to the platform. And I know that's a highly requested feature for the early elementary grades. And I would say that the best thing to do is to keep an eye on the roadmap. And we keep that updated on a regular basis. And at this point, there's nothing on the roadmap for that's posted out on the website, but I do think it's something that we hear a lot about, and it's something we certainly are keeping our eyes and ears open to how that might look and feel.
And that roadmap is at support.schoology.com, and there should be a link there on that page. So last question, because we're running a bit over time here, but I think this is a really good one. So Pam asks, would it be a good option, I assume, would using an LMS be a good option for students who are homebound? They could access the class virtually.
That is a really great way for the use of an LMS. And I think it's not just a student who's homebound, it's a student who has extracurricular activities, students who are for whatever reason participating in, say, band or choir or sports or homebound, or any of those types of things. They can stay connected to the classroom. I actually was on site with a district, and we were talking to some students, and they said they love the way that they use their LMS because it allows them to get to do things outside of the classroom that helps them have a richer experience and richer learning experience, and not get confined in their academic fields. And so they feel like they can be more well-rounded because they have access to their course materials in and out, inside the classroom and outside the classroom. And so a student who's homebound desperately wants to be connected, so they can be part of the class discussions. They have all the materials. They don't have to wait for the teacher to go talk to the teacher, so that the homebound teacher can go home and work with the student who's homebound. So it really does create more of a real-time experience for the homebound student.
And that's working in the creative field. Creativity is not something that just kind of comes in all the time. It's in set hours of the day, right? You can try all you want, but it's not going to work that way. So having the opportunity to do creative work outside the classroom as well as inside, and have that just being able to always access that and having that thought in your head as you're kind of mulling over these new ideas that you're learning in school, I think is a really powerful way to unlock higher order thinking for lots of students. Excellent. Well, okay, so that does it, everyone. First of all, thank you, those of you who stayed to ask questions. We really appreciate it. It's great to have a little bit of a conversation going here. Again, thank you, Kara. It's been great chatting with you.
It's my pleasure. I hope we get to do this again.
Absolutely, we will. All right, everyone. Until next month, have a good one.
Bye-bye.